In May of 1997, Terry London became the chief executive officer of Gaylord Entertainment. 8 months later, Opryland USA was closed. 7 months after that, the site was cleared. If you ever went to that park, if Briley Parkway means something to you, this is the story of what happened to it. Not sold to another operator, not relocated, demolished. The rides dismantled, the land cleared, 25 years of operation and 2 million visitors a year, gone. Gaylord's own management would eventually confirm in writing that there was no business plan. The executives who came after London went looking for the strategic analysis behind the closure and found nothing. There was no compelling reason given for why the decision was made in the first place. This is the story of that decision. Who made it, what he said publicly while it was happening, what the documents show, and what a Christian music website has to do with any of it. There are places that function as more than entertainment. They become the shared reference point for an entire place. The thing that different generations and different families had in common, the place that showed up in the same sentence, whether you were talking to someone who was there in 1975 or someone who was there in 1995. Opryland USA was one of those places for Nashville, for Tennessee, and for the American South. It opened on May 27, 1972, 8 months after Walt Disney World opened in Florida. Think about what that opened timing meant. The major theme park boom was still just getting started. Epcot did not exist yet. Six Flags was still primarily a regional chain. And into this moment came a park that did not try to be Disney. It positioned itself from day one as the home of American music. The park was built on a triangle of land east of downtown Nashville, bounded on one side by the Cumberland River and on another by Briley Parkway. 120 acres. The property was organized around musical traditions, bluegrass and folk in one section, New Orleans and riverboat culture in another, rock and roll, modern country, the full sprawl of what American music had become by the early 1970s. Each section had its own architecture, its own atmosphere, its own set of live performances running throughout the day. And that is the thing that made Opryland different from every other regional park of its era. The rides were there. The Wabash Cannonball roller coaster, named after the Roy Acuff song. The Grizzly River Rampage, a whitewater rafting ride that, in 1995, hosted the qualifying competition for the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta. Olympic Trials. On a theme park ride, the 1996 Games sent athletes to Nashville to compete for a spot, and they did it on the Grizzly River Rampage. That is how good it was. But Opryland ran 12 to 20 live shows every single day. Not a stage here and there, a full performance schedule across multiple theaters, with hundreds of musicians and singers and dancers employed every season. The Gaslight Theater, the Roy Acuff Theater, the Country Music USA Review at the Theater by the Lake, an hour-long production that traced the development of Nashville's country sound. If you were a young performer in Nashville in the 1970s, the 1980s, or the early 1990s, Opryland was where you worked while you waited for your break. It was a training ground with a live audience of thousands. A bluegrass group called the Tennessee River Boys formed at Opryland in 1982. They played the park as a house act for years, getting better in front of real audiences every single day of the operating season. They became Diamond Rio. Their debut single, Meet in the Middle, came out in 1991. It became the first debut single by a country music group in history to reach #1 on the Billboard Country chart. The park that Terry London demolished in 1997 is the reason Diamond Rio exists. If you did not know that before this video, you are not alone. That is the kind of thing that disappears when a place disappears. By 1977, 5 years after opening, Opryland was drawing close to 2 million visitors a year and had become Nashville's #1 tourist attraction. It employed 4,000 people during peak season. First jobs for teenagers, summer work for college students, career positions for performers, technical staff, and food service workers who built their entire professional lives around the park's operating calendar. For a seasonal operation in a mid-sized city, that is not a small number. In 1974, the Grand Ole Opry moved from the Ryman Auditorium downtown into a new Opry House built right next to the park. President Nixon attended the dedication ceremony. Roy Acuff opened the show with the Wabash Cannonball. In 1977, the Opryland Hotel opened on the property. It would grow into one of the largest non-casino hotels in the United States, with an indoor garden and a river flowing through the lobby. In 1985, the General Jackson Showboat, a 300-foot paddle-wheel riverboat, began running dinner cruises on the Cumberland River. A working theater on a working boat, with live performances in the morning, the afternoon, and the evening, moving through Nashville's waterfront. None of this was accidental. Every piece of it was assembled by a man named Bud Wendell. Wendell had been with the Grand Ole Opry organization since 1968. He became president and chief executive officer of Gaylord Entertainment in 1991. He understood, the way people who build things understand, what he was managing. The park drove hotel occupancy. The hotel's convention business was the highest occupancy operation in its category in North America, partly because convention planners could offer their attendees a world-class entertainment destination right next door. The Nashville network broadcast live from inside the park. TNN reached cable audiences across the country, and that national exposure sent visitors to Nashville, and those visitors filled the hotel, and the hotel's financial performance funded further investment in everything. Bud Wendell was not running a theme park. He was running an ecosystem. Every element fed every other element. The park filled the hotel. The hotel funded the convention business. The convention business brought executives who went home and put Nashville on the map for people who had never considered it. The Nashville network put the park on television every week. The Opry House gave Nashville a live music venue with national prestige. All of it connected. All of it working. It was an ecosystem. Bud Wendell built it over 25 years. In early 1997, he retired. If you grew up going to Opryland, if your family made the drive to Nashville for a summer weekend, if this was the place you associate with what it felt like to be a kid in the American South in the 1970s, the 1980s, or the 1990s, what happens next is the reason this video exists. Terry London had been Gaylord's chief financial officer. He became chief executive officer on May 1, 1997. He had a vision for what Gaylord Entertainment should become, and it did not include a seasonal theme park on 120 acres of increasingly valuable Nashville real estate. By summer, rumors had started moving through Nashville's business community. The park was being reviewed. Something was changing. In August of 1997, a reporter from the Nashville Banner asked Gaylord's vice president, Alan Hall, directly, "Is it true? Are you closing Opryland?" Hall denied it. He said, "We are not going to level the park." On November 4, 1997, 11 weeks after that denial, Gaylord announced the park would close. A $275 million project called Destination Opryland would transform the property. A shopping mall, a marina, broadcast facilities, a revamped entertainment plaza. The announcement stated that approximately 2/3 of Opryland's existing rides and shows would be preserved as part of the new development. Within 3 weeks of that announcement, 13 of Opryland's major rides were sold. The official explanations for the closure came in layers, and each one has a problem. Gaylord said attendance was down in 1997. That was technically true. Attendance in 1997 was below attendance in 1996. What the statement did not say was that 1996 was Opryland's 25-year anniversary year, a year with special programming and events that drove an above-average spike. Measured against any normal operating year in the park's history, 1997 attendance was unremarkable. The park was not in decline. It was at its historical pace. Gaylord said the park could not expand. The land was bounded by the river, the highway, and the hotel. This argument was repeated often enough that it became received wisdom. What it conceals is that the argument was never tested. Critics of the decision have argued that the existing footprint could have supported new attractions. Whether London's management evaluated any of that seriously is unknown. What is documented is that Gaylord's own subsequent leadership went looking for the strategic analysis behind the closure. They couldn't find one. Gaylord said the park did not generate revenue during winter months. That was true, and it had always been. Opryland was a seasonal operation, like most theme parks north of Florida. The argument was that a mall would produce consistent, year-round income. What the argument ignored was that by 1997, retail analysts were already publishing research on the structural pressure that e-commerce was placing on regional shopping malls. The internet was not a secret. Its implications for physical retail were being discussed openly in the business press, and Gaylord, having just closed America's only musical theme park, signed a deal to build a mall on its footprint. This is also the moment to understand what was happening inside Gaylord's leadership. London was not just a skeptic of the theme park, he had a specific vision for what the company should become instead, and it was not hotels, and it was not country music, and it was not Nashville. We will come back to that. If you have never heard any of this before, and you want to understand how often this pattern repeats, there is a catalog above this video. The same story, different names, different decades. It is worth your time. In 2004, new Gaylord Entertainment management conducted a review of the closure decision. They went looking for the paperwork, the planning, the rationale, anything that explained what happened. What they found, or really what they could not find, was striking. They found no business plan for closing Opryland USA. Their spokesperson said it publicly. The current management team has found no compelling reason why the decision to close the park was taken in the first place. 8 months, one CEO, and no documented rationale. The park's last night was December 31st, 1997. People came knowing it was the end. Some had been coming every summer for 25 years. Some were bringing their children for the first and last time. They wanted one more ride on the Wabash Cannonball, one more walk down the Midway in the Christmas lights, one more show. By February of 1998, Gaylord was holding a tent sale in the parking lot. Leftover park merchandise sold at clearance prices. Postcards, t-shirts, the kind of inventory you move when there is no store left to sell it from. By July of 1998, the site was cleared. The Hangman, an inverted roller coaster that opened in 1995, had cost $8.5 million to build. It was sold as part of the Premier Parks deal, far below what it cost to build. It went to Six Flags Discovery Kingdom in California, where it ran as Kong. The Rock and Roller Coaster went to Six Flags Great Escape in New York as Canyon Blaster. The Old Mill Scream became Lumberjack Falls at a park in Washington State. Chaos and the Screaming Delta Demon, along with several other rides, were sent to a Premier Parks property in Thorntown, Indiana. It was an old amusement site where a new park was supposed to be developed. The park was never built. The rides sat in a field, exposed to Indiana winters, for years. Between 2003 and 2006, they were sold for scrap metal. $8.5 million of engineering was cut apart with torches and weighed in at salvage prices. Gaylord reported $40.2 million in costs associated with closing the park. That is the number that went into the SEC filing. $40 million to close something that was profitable. 4,000 seasonal jobs were gone. For many of the people who held them, Opryland was not a career. It was a first job. The place where a 17-year-old in Nashville learned to show up on time, to smile through a 12-hour shift in August heat, to handle a situation the training manual did not cover. Nashville had been providing that experience every summer since 1972. It stopped in 1997. Butch Spiridon, who ran the Nashville Convention and Visitors Bureau at the time, later said that Opryland had been the catalyst that launched Nashville's growth as a major city. Before the park, visitors came for the Grand Ole Opry and left. The park created a reason to stay, and then it was gone. Nashville's tourism numbers declined for 3 years. Then, the September 11th attacks hit the travel industry, and recovery took another 3 years after that. The Bureau repositioned downtown Nashville as a museum by day and a theme park by night. They leaned into Lower Broadway and the honky-tonk district. They built something that works, but they built something different. London announced that 2/3 of the park's rides and shows would be preserved as part of the new Destination Opryland project. Within 3 weeks, the rides were sold to Premier Parks. The announcement was not accurate. There is no polite way to say that. What Terry London wanted Gaylord to become was a digital media company, more specifically, a Christian music digital media company. In 1999, Gaylord acquired a controlling stake in MusicForce.com, a Christian music website. MusicForce.com then acquired LightSource.com, a provider of Christian content for online distribution. These properties were combined into a new division called Get Digital Media. Internal projections called for $20 million in revenue by the year 2000. In 2000, the internet bubble burst. Get Digital Media was shut down or sold off. By 2001, Gaylord Entertainment had taken a $59 million charge writing down its internet investments. $59 million, against projected revenue that never materialized. Gaylord spent $40.2 million to close a profitable theme park. Then it absorbed a $59 million write-down on those same Christian digital media investments. In less than 4 years, a company that had spent 25 years building one of the most distinctive entertainment businesses in the country had taken on close to $100 million in costs and write-downs from decisions that the company's next CEO would later call simply a bad idea. London resigned in July 2000. The park had been closed for 2.5 years. The rides that had not been placed in other parks were already rusting in Indiana. The company had just written off $59 million on Christian digital media investments that fell far short of every revenue projection the company had made. E.K. Gaylord II became interim chief executive officer. The company eventually hired Colin Reed as permanent chief executive officer in 2001. Reed said he spent much of his first year fielding calls about the closure decision, from former guests, from Nashville residents, from people who wanted someone at Gaylord to explain what had happened. In 2012, 15 years after the closure, Reed called it a bad idea. Not in the softened language of corporate retrospection. A bad idea. Opry Mills opened in May 2000. It was 1.2 million square feet with more than 200 stores. The Mills Corporation projected 17 million annual visitors compared to the 2 million the park had drawn. Those projections proved far too optimistic. On May 1, 2010, it rained. More than 13 inches of rain fell on Nashville in 2 days. The Cumberland River rose to levels not recorded since 1937, before the Army Corps of Engineers had built the flood control systems that were supposed to prevent exactly this. Opry Mills took several feet of water. The Gaylord Opryland Hotel had sections under 10 feet of water at the flood's peak. The Grand Ole Opry House had 4 feet of water covering the stage where Roy Acuff had opened the building back in 1974, with Nixon in the audience. Opry Mills stayed closed for nearly 2 years while Gaylord and its insurers fought over the claim. The Tennessee Court of Appeals ruled that the mall could collect $50 million on a $200 million policy. The reason was that the mall had been built in a known flood zone. The park that preceded it had been there too, on the same land, subject to the same river. Opryland flooded in 1975, a 16-foot rise that delayed the opening of a new section and killed several animals in the petting zoo. The park recovered. It opened the new section a month late. It kept running for 22 more years. After the 2010 flood, Gaylord spent $17 million building a 10-foot concrete flood wall around the Opryland compound on land where a theme park used to stand. A wall to protect the mall, the hotel, and the Opry House from the next 1,000-year flood. Wendell gave an interview in 2018. He called the closure the dumbest thing he had ever seen. The people responsible for it, he said, would look back and admit it was a dumb decision. They felt they could get a greater return on that piece of acreage if it were a mall, as opposed to a theme park. America's only musical theme park. If you know someone who grew up going to Opryland, someone who still wonders what happened to it, share this with them. The answer is in this video. They have probably been waiting 27 years for it. 3 structures from the Opryland era remain in their original locations. The Grand Ole Opry House, the Roy Acuff House, now used as a WSM radio studio, and the former Grand Ole Opry Museum, now a company training center. Everything else is parking, or retail, or concrete. This is how it ends for places like this. Not with bankruptcy, not with declining attendance, not with some failure the people who loved it could have seen coming. It ends with a spreadsheet and a person who looked at what existed and saw something different, something more financially rational, something that on paper made more sense than a musical theme park that had been drawing 2 million visitors a year for 2 decades. That is why, in 2004, Gaylord's own management went looking for the business plan and found nothing. That is why, in 2012, the chief executive called it a bad idea. That is why, in 2018, Wendell, more than 20 years removed from the decision, still called it the dumbest thing he had ever seen. The math was always obvious to the people who understood what they were looking at. It was only obvious to the people who did not understand it after the money was gone. There is something worth sitting with in that. Not the failure of the mall or the internet bet. The simpler thing. A profitable institution, serving 2 million people a year, employing 4,000 people, anchoring a regional tourism economy. Gone in 8 months. No plan. Because someone with a spreadsheet decided the land was worth more than what was standing on it. In May of 1972, Opryland USA opened its gates, 8 months after Walt Disney World. It ran for exactly 25 years. It survived a flood, a recession, and the slow consolidation of the American entertainment industry. 2 million visitors every year. A brand that Gaylord's own management would eventually describe as something they could not find a rational reason to have destroyed. Then, a new chief executive arrived. 8 months later, it was closed. The rides are scrap metal. The trees are gone. The Tennessee River Boys became Diamond Rio. Diamond Rio still tours. Next time, we will look at another institution that looked healthy from the outside, right up until the moment it was not. The pattern does not change. Only the names do.